remember the first time I held the wedding invitation in my hands. The embossed gold lettering shimmered under the soft light of my kitchen, and for a moment, the world seemed perfectly aligned. I was the proud parent, the one who had watched my child grow from a tiny, laughing bundle into a person I could barely recognize but loved fiercely all the same. I had imagined this day countless times, the laughter, the tears, the joy radiating through every corner of that room. I could feel it in my bones, a mixture of pride and anticipation that made my heart ache with both happiness and a touch of anxiety. After all, weddings are not only celebrations, they are examinations, too. The careful judgment of family, the unspoken rules of etiquette, the whispers of expectations. In my mind, I was ready to meet them all with grace. I had spent the previous weeks preparing. I scoured magazines for outfits, debated colors with my friends, and even consulted a stylist who assured me that my dress reflected both elegance and dignity. I wanted to feel special, not in a boastful way, but as a parent who had poured years of love, guidance, and care into my child. Yet lurking behind that excitement was a whisper of doubt. Would I be accepted? Would I be celebrated or quietly sidelined? Would my presence feel like warmth, or would it be a shadow of inconvenience? I shook my head at such thoughts, dismissing them as overthinking. I had always been an optimist, a believer in family, and I convinced myself that love alone would carry me through. The days leading up to the wedding were a blur of planning and small domestic rituals. I baked cookies, polished silverware, and made sure that every gesture reflected my heart. My partner, bless their patient soul, watched me with a knowing smile, offering quiet encouragement when my nerves bubbled up like an unsteady stream. But even their calm could not drown the anxious voices I carried with me. During one evening tea with my child and their soon-to-be spouse, I felt a subtle shift in energy. My child, bright-eyed and radiant, spoke with enthusiasm about the wedding plans, the guests, and the venue. But the daughter-in-law's smile, carefully measured, never quite reached her eyes. There was warmth, certainly, but also a strange distance, as if she were maintaining a polite boundary that I did not yet understand. It was in that moment, a brief pause during conversation, that she dropped the words like a stone into still water. "You know," she said, almost casually, stirring her tea, "I just don't think it's well that you're really special enough to be involved in certain things." The words hung in the air, heavier than anything I could have anticipated. I blinked, unsure if I had heard her correctly. "Special enough," I echoed, my voice a mixture of disbelief and hurt, trying to catch the drift of her meaning. She replied, almost offhandedly, as if the entire exchange were mundane, as if it were no more significant than the weather. Her tone was neither cruel nor angry. It was measured, detached, almost polite. But the emotional impact struck like lightning. I felt my chest tighten, the room blur around the edges, and a creeping numbness settle over me. Every memory, every shared laugh, every late-night conversation I had had with my child felt suddenly fragile. Fragile in the way fine china is fragile, beautiful, cherished, but easily shattered. I remember forcing a smile, trying to meet her gaze with calm, even though inside a storm was raging. My mind raced. Had I misjudged her? Was this some twisted test? Or was it a casual dismissal, a subtle declaration that my presence, my love, my history with my child was somehow inadequate? I wanted to defend myself, to explain my devotion, to justify the countless sacrifices made silently, but words failed me. I realized then how easy it is to be blindsided not by overt malice, but by the quiet weight of indifference, by a statement that seems polite, yet pierces deeply. The rest of the evening passed in a strange haze. Every smile I offered felt forced. Every word I spoke seemed to echo against invisible walls of judgment. My child seemed oblivious, laughing and planning, but I could not shake the feeling of being quietly, irrevocably excluded. There is a peculiar type of loneliness in such moments, a sense that you are visible yet unseen, present yet irrelevant. I found myself analyzing every interaction, every glance, every subtle shift in tone, searching for meaning where perhaps there was none, and yet fearing that there was everything. I reflected on the contrast between the excitement I had felt just days before and the sudden anxiety that now gripped me. How quickly hope can give way to doubt, how swiftly love can feel overshadowed by judgment. I had imagined a celebration filled with joy and acceptance, and instead, I was grappling with the painful realization that family bonds, however strong, could still be fragile when weighed against perception, pride, and personal insecurities. As I lay awake that night, the room silent except for the faint hum of the air conditioner, I turned over every possibility in my mind. Was I overreacting? Was she simply nervous, or was this a glimpse into a deeper, unspoken hierarchy? I considered my child, my beloved, brilliant, sometimes stubborn child. How could they be unaware, or worse, complicit in this subtle exclusion? A part of me wanted to retreat, to pull back from the wedding plans and shield myself from further hurt. Yet another part burned with loyalty, the unwavering, unshakable love that had carried me through sleepless nights, scraped knees, and every trial along the way. Could I step back? Could I let this slight, whether intentional or not, dictate the depth of my involvement in this most important day? The next morning, I approached the kitchen table with a fragile sense of resolve. I had to navigate this carefully. I had to find a way to maintain dignity, to preserve relationships, to protect the emotional bonds that mattered most, even when faced with subtle dismissal. I observed interactions at breakfast, the daughter-in-law's meticulous arrangement of plates, the way she directed conversation, the slight tension in the air when I attempted to participate. Small, almost imperceptible signs, but each one a reminder that the dynamics had shifted. I realized that this was no longer about the wedding alone. It was about trust, respect, and the moral center of the family I had helped nurture. I began to notice patterns, subtle contrasts that had eluded me before. Moments of warmth from my child juxtaposed with the cool politeness from their partner. Expressions of loyalty from friends and extended family weighed against hushed whispers and sideways glances. Every encounter became a lesson in interpretation, a delicate balancing act between understanding motives and protecting my own emotional well-being. It was exhausting, this mental calculus, yet strangely illuminating. I was learning to see the fractures beneath the surface of civility, the cracks that could widen if left unattended. And so, I approached each day with cautious optimism. I participated in planning sessions, offered help where it was needed, and smiled through interactions that left me unsettled. But in quiet moments when no one was watching, I allowed myself to feel the sting of exclusion, the ache of being deemed not special enough. I wrote in my journal, capturing every nuance of my feelings, trying to make sense of the jumble of emotions: hurt, love, confusion, loyalty, resentment, hope. I realized that emotional resilience does not mean the absence of pain. It means acknowledging it, confronting it, and choosing how to move forward despite it. As the wedding day drew closer, the tension became more palpable. I could feel the stakes rising, not just the event itself, but the unseen social tests, the delicate negotiations of ego and expectation. Every conversation with the daughter-in-law, every interaction with family members, became layered with unspoken significance. I was acutely aware of contrasts: joy versus anxiety, loyalty versus betrayal, love versus judgment. Each decision I made, each word I chose, carried weight, because the narrative of inclusion and respect was still being written. And I was determined, quietly but firmly, that my presence, dignity, and love would not be erased by a single dismissive comment. Even amidst the swirl of emotion, I found moments of clarity. I recognized that this was more than personal slight. It was a reflection of human complexity, of fragile egos, of unspoken fears, and the constant negotiation between perception and reality. I began to understand that the daughter-in-law's comment, while painfully delivered, offered me a rare opportunity to assert boundaries, to exercise grace, and to navigate the moral landscape with integrity rather than anger. There was suspense in that realization, the tension of choosing how to act, how to respond, how to preserve relationships without sacrificing self-respect. And so the stage was set. The wedding, once a symbol of pure joy, had become a crucible for emotional courage. I felt the weight of loyalty and betrayal, of love and disappointment, pressing against me from every angle. Each day was a careful dance, each interaction a test of both patience and perception. But amid the uncertainty, I clung to hope, the same hope that had carried me through years of parenting, through challenges both small and great. I would face the coming days with awareness, with compassion, and most importantly, with a resolve to navigate the delicate interplay of family, respect, and emotional truth. The unexpected exclusion was no longer merely a comment. It was the opening act of a larger story, a narrative that would test the boundaries of love, loyalty, and moral courage. And as I prepared to step fully into that story, I realized that the true challenge was not the wedding itself, but the quiet reckoning that awaited me, the subtle confrontations and moral reckonings that would demand everything I had learned about patience, strength, and emotional resilience. I did not yet know how it would end, but I felt it in my bones. The journey had begun. The morning after that fateful comment, I woke with a heaviness I hadn't expected. The words "not special enough" replayed in my mind like a broken record, each repetition digging deeper than the last. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, weighing every option. Could I ignore it and pretend nothing had happened? Could I retreat into silence, sparing myself further hurt? Or was the only path forward to confront the truth, however uncomfortable, however uncertain the outcome? I realized that this wasn't merely about pride. It was about understanding, about navigating the delicate balance of family bonds without losing myself in the process. Strength, I told myself, isn't always loud. Sometimes it's quiet, steady, and deliberate. I started with observation. I watched interactions at breakfast, at casual family gatherings, and even through social media updates. The daughter-in-law's demeanor was polished, her smiles careful, but the smallest gestures betrayed subtle insecurities. A pause here, a fleeting frown there, a hesitancy in tone. Each detail felt like a piece of a puzzle I was only beginning to see. Contrast framed every moment. Where she appeared confident, there was hidden fear. Where she projected warmth, there was guardedness. I reminded myself that what seemed like indifference or exclusion might, in fact, be layers of anxiety shaped by societal expectations and personal history. My child was a constant fulcrum in this delicate dance. Their loyalty was unwavering, yet I sensed their occasional frustration with my probing, my insistence on understanding every nuance. They wanted harmony, smooth sailing, and I wanted clarity, justice, and moral integrity. It was a subtle but persistent tug-of-war, illustrating the contrast between fear and courage, passivity and action. I realized that my role wasn't to dictate, but to navigate, to model integrity and empathy even when emotions surged like wild rivers within me. I planned my approach carefully. The confrontation could not be rash or fueled by hurt alone. I needed to create a space where honesty could flourish without defensiveness, where grievances could be aired without rancor. I invited the daughter-in-law for tea, under the guise of casual conversation, though in truth, my heart pounded with anticipation and uncertainty. Each step toward that meeting felt weighted with moral gravity, the possibility of reconciliation, of understanding, or of further emotional fracture. The contrast of weakness versus strength never felt more palpable. Could I muster the courage to speak, to listen, and to act with integrity even if the exchange became painful? When we sat across from each other, I felt the tension coil between us like a spring. I began gently, acknowledging the pressures she must feel, the expectations she carried, and the desire to make the wedding perfect. I chose words deliberately, balancing honesty with empathy. "I want to understand," I said, voice calm yet firm. "I want to know why you said I wasn't special enough." She looked at me, eyes flickering with surprise, a mix of guilt and relief. For a moment, silence reigned, a quiet suspense hanging over the table like a fragile glass sculpture, waiting for the first word to tip the balance. Her story unfolded in layers. There was insecurity rooted in her upbringing, a childhood marked by judgment and the constant striving to please. There were societal pressures, subtle messages about status, image, and the right way to behave. She confessed, in halting words, that she had feared my involvement would overshadow or complicate the ceremony, that her intentions, though clumsy, were shaped by a desire to control outcomes and protect her own anxieties. Each revelation was a blade of both relief and sorrow. Relief that her comment wasn't born of malice, sorrow that fear and judgment had led her to wound me without realizing it. As she spoke, I felt the contrasting emotions swirl within me, resentment and empathy, hurt and understanding, caution and hope. It would have been easy to erupt, to demand apologies, to punish her emotionally for the sting she had caused. But instead, I chose the path of moral courage. I listened, validated her feelings, and gently shared my own, explaining how deeply the words had cut, how loyalty and love demand recognition, and how family bonds thrive on respect and inclusion. I saw her posture relax, the tension ebbing as acknowledgement replaced defensiveness. The confrontation, far from explosive, became a bridge, a carefully constructed passage from misunderstanding to understanding. From that conversation, the next steps unfolded naturally. I observed how she interacted afterward, noting subtle shifts in tone and body language. The warmth she now extended was more genuine, her smiles freer, less calculated. I began to see the seeds of connection replanting themselves in the fertile soil of honesty. My child watched quietly, absorbing the new dynamic, their own relief mirrored in fleeting glances and small, reassuring gestures. The emotional suspense had not fully dissipated, but the path forward was illuminated by mutual respect and understanding. The wedding approached, and with it, moments that tested these newly forged bonds. I noticed fleeting comparisons, whispered judgments, and subtle tensions among other family members, yet I approached each situation with a renewed sense of balance. My choices were deliberate, choosing to engage with warmth, asserting boundaries where necessary, and allowing empathy to guide interactions. Each act of measured courage contrasted with past fear, reinforcing my sense of agency and moral clarity. I realized that integrity is rarely a loud proclamation. It is the quiet, steady insistence on acting rightly even when circumstances challenge patience and understanding. When the wedding day arrived, the culmination of planning, emotion, and anticipation, I felt a mixture of exhilaration and calm. I could see her looking at me with respect, a subtle acknowledgement of our shared understanding. The ceremony unfolded beautifully, not because every detail was perfect, but because honesty, courage, and integrity had created a foundation strong enough to weather any storm. I felt pride not only in my child and their partner, but in myself, in the way I had navigated hurt and confrontation to achieve moral and emotional clarity. In the aftermath, I reflected on the lessons learned. I had faced fear with courage, resentment with empathy, and exclusion with patience. I had discovered that understanding often requires deliberate attention, observation, and the willingness to confront discomfort directly. Moral triumph does not always mean victory over another. Sometimes it means asserting one's dignity, fostering communication, and allowing human complexity to find resolution. Loyalty and love are strengthened not by avoidance, but by the courage to engage honestly, even when the path is treacherous. I also recognized the enduring bonds of family that had been tested but not broken. The daughter-in-law's initial comment, painful as it had been, became a catalyst for growth, both hers and mine. Through dialogue, observation, and emotional reckoning, we forged a connection grounded in mutual respect and understanding. I realized that inclusion is not merely a matter of presence. It is recognition, affirmation, and shared responsibility. It is the willingness to see each other fully, with flaws, fears, and strengths alike. Looking back, I understood that this journey had transformed me. I had learned to navigate subtle emotional landscapes, to exercise patience without surrendering integrity, and to balance empathy with self-respect. I had learned that confrontation, when approached thoughtfully, can become a bridge rather than a battleground. And I had discovered that moral clarity arises not from avoiding pain, but from engaging with it, understanding its source, and responding with courage and compassion. As I stand now in the quiet reflection after the wedding, I feel a profound sense of fulfillment. The trials of misunderstanding and subtle exclusion gave way to honesty, reconciliation, and emotional growth. The daughter-in-law, once a source of silent tension, became a participant in a shared story of understanding. My child, witnessing this journey, absorbed lessons about patience, courage, and the power of integrity. And I, carrying these experiences forward, know that emotional resilience, moral courage, and love are not abstract ideals. They are lived, tested, and ultimately proven through the choices we make in moments of discomfort and conflict. The narrative, once shadowed by exclusion and subtle judgment, had transformed into one of moral triumph, emotional clarity, and strengthened bonds. I had faced the fear of confrontation, turned resentment into empathy, and discovered the enduring power of patience, observation, and deliberate action. Love, loyalty, and family are never simple, but they are resilient, capable of growth and understanding when met with courage and integrity. And so, I close this chapter, not with bitterness or regret, but with gratitude, for the challenges that tested me, for the honesty that healed rifts, and for the enduring bonds that were reaffirmed through courage, dialogue, and the unwavering commitment to doing what is right. I am not only a witness to my child's happiness, but a participant in the moral and emotional journey that led us here. And in that realization, I find both peace and strength, ready to face whatever future trials may come, knowing that clarity, integrity, and love will guide my way.